as you know, we are in the week 5 of our deep dive series. We've had the week 1 where we looked at the introduction, second week, third week, we looked at Windows Autopilot. We also, and in the week 4, we looked at the configuration profiles or policies, as the case may be. But this week, this weekend, we'll be looking at the compliance policies and conditional access. So, because we know these classes, I won't say classes now, they're not classes. These sessions are intermediate. So, most of us will say might be very, very complex. But I'll try as much to break them down as much as I can. That's why we have the question and answer session. So, if you have any questions, you can always ask them immediately, or can just pen them down in the chat. I also have some very strong mentors on the call that can quickly respond. Persons of Emmanuel Imafu, welcome. And then Rafia, these are my ogas on the call that can give you quick response if you can't wait till the end. Okay, so I'll just jump right into it. We're looking at compliance policies and conditional access, and we are tying this to Intune. So what is compliance policies? It's how we enforce device health rules and block access using device until devices comply. So compliance policies and configuration profiles. Last class we spoke about configuration profiles. We saw what you can do, how you can create profiles, enforce it for devices and everything. But now I want to talk about compliance policies, and we are going to see a very, very, very strong difference between the compliance policies and the configuration profiles because they are very, very deep. But we're going to see it, and then I'm sure we would understand better when we see the difference between the compliance policies and the conditional access or the configuration profile. Sorry. So what are we looking at today? We're going to look at some core concepts, compliance rules, conditional access, Windows Hello, Windows Hello for Business in particular, and then some non-compliance actions. And then we'll take a few quiz and get into the hands-on lab. So next slide is the learning objectives. By the end of this session, we should be able to define what compliance policy is. Would also be able to identify most common compliance rules, for example, PIN and password encryption, determining the operating system version, health attestation, and threat level that is integrated into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Would also explain how Entra Conditional Access consume the Intune compliance signal, describe the role of Windows Hello for Business, list the actions Intune can take when a device is non-compliant. We're going to create a compliance policy together, and then we're going to build a basic conditional policy as well that allows only compliant devices to reach Exchange Online, which is what we're going to test. All right, so what is a device compliance policy? Please, if at any time you can't hear me, please let me know because my network has been acting funny, but I think it's been stable for a while. But if you can't hear me at any time, please just call my attention. All right, so what's the device compliance policies? For those of us that know, it's actually a collection of rules and settings that define the minimum health and security requirements a managed device must satisfy. So unlike a configuration profile, which actively pushes settings onto a device, a compliance policy evaluates what is already on a device and issues a verdict, either compliant or non-compliant. This is reported to Entra ID and consumed by conditional access to make real-time access decisions. So I would explain. As you know, with configuration profile, they would include settings that needs to be enforced. So you are pushing profiles. You are saying, I want this Wi-Fi profile on my managed devices, or I want my devices to be BitLocker, to have BitLocker encryption turned on, or I want this firewall policy to be turned on, and then for every device that is managed, once they pick up that profile, it automatically turns on all the settings you've created. But that's not the case with compliance policies. So compliance policies are there to just evaluate. So in the essence, let's just say configuration profiles enforces while compliance policies evaluates. So that's the difference, because at some point, and I want to believe this is already familiar with most of us. Like I said, this call is an intermediate call. So I believe some of us on this call already interface with Intune on a daily basis. So you know what it means. We're just here to remind ourselves. So if you go into the settings in each of them, either in the device configuration profile or the device compliance policy. Sometimes you find that some policies or some settings look alike. An example would be the PIN and password, setting PIN unlock and everything. You'll find it as a profile. You can also find it as a setting in the policy. But just so you know that the one you create on a configuration profile, like a setting you create on configuration profile, is always enforced. But if you create a setting in a compliance policy, it just evaluates it and then lets you know if it's compliant or not. So most times you'll find that people would create a configuration profile with the same setting and also create a compliance policy. Yes, it depends on what the organization requires. So you just don't want to enforce it. You also want to be able to evaluate to see that, okay, it's enforced and these users actually are compliant to what my business or what my organization requires at that time. So that's the basic difference between a configuration profile and a compliance policy. We'll still see there are still some differences we'll evaluate. And I think in the fourth or fifth slide, we'll see things between the two as well. So let's look at some of these cards. Evaluation, not enforcement. So this is the most important conceptual distinction to understand. A configuration profile tells the device what to do. Like we say, it enforces it. It can write, it can modify registry keys. It pushes VPN credentials and enforces restrictions directly on the device or on the user that it is assigned to. But a compliance policy, by contrast, asks questions and listens for answers. So it checks, does this device have a PIN set? Is it BitLocker enabled? Is the device OS version above the minimum required? The device answers, and Intune records the results. And then Entra ID uses that result downstream. So how Entra ID uses that result is where we now get the integration with conditional access. But I won't speak so much until we get to that slide. Then the policy does not fix problems. It only reports them. Like I said, it's not an enforcer. It's just an evaluation tool. Then how does it integrate with Entra ID? So after an Intune compliance policy evaluates a device, the resulting compliance states, we've got three. It's either the device is compliant, it's not compliant, or not evaluated. Cases where it's not evaluated is if Intune has not checked into the device, or the device is not online, or the device is simply not picking policies. It means it can't be evaluated. So those three states. If you create a compliance policy, the devices after the next sync would have to be in one of these three states, either compliant, non-compliant, or not evaluated. And then it's written to the device object in the Azure Active Directory as a device attribute. You find that. And then conditional access policies in Entra ID can then now reference this attribute as a condition. And you see something like require device to be marked as compliant. So this is one setting every enterprise admin works with. Like, I think it's even one of the default conditional access policies. We'll look at it, but it's sometimes required from Microsoft that you require that devices be marked as compliant, such that if a compliance policy runs and then your device is not compliant, you can actually block that device from accessing organizational resources. And so this is how compliance policies in Intune interplays with conditional access also in Entra ID. So, and all of this happens without the user or the admin needing to intervene in each individual access attempt. So in case you are working with 1,001 devices, you obviously don't want to keep checking compliance on each of them. But with compliance plus conditional access policy, you see how you can ensure that only compliant devices are allowed or are permitted to work with data in your organization. And then lastly is the reporting and visibility. So every compliance policy produces rich per device, per setting reporting inside the Intune admin center. This is something I always, whenever I'm speaking about Intune, I always like the fact that I can quickly generate reports based on settings or configurations that are created. This is one I would say one selling point Intune would have over other device management tools, because you can quickly track. Though sometimes you might not be able to immediately track, maybe for new devices, like I said, in case the device doesn't check in. But if a device checks in, you have a very rich reporting. And that's what we rely on to be able to draw conclusions. I say, okay, say 20% of device organizations are not compliant. What could it be? Could it be the OS version? So all this can be tracked. So all this is also being tracked as devices are either compliant or not compliant or not evaluated. So admins can see exactly which devices are compliant, yeah, not compliant, and critically, which specific rule caused the non-compliance. So when we looked at, in our last class, when we looked at configuration profile, we saw how you could have more than 10 settings in one profile, and then one particular setting, if it's not set all right, or if it's not evaluated, or if it's failed, can mean that the entire profile is failed as well. Same thing would also happen with the compliance. So if you have a lot of settings in a compliance policy, you need to can check each setting. So you can review each setting to confirm which one is causing the non-compliance state, and then you can take that information to fix as an admin. So the dashboard shows counts by OS, by policy, and by reason. This visibility is invaluable in a large organization. You can quickly identify that 90% of non-compliance is due to a single outdated Windows build version, allowing you to target your remediation efforts precisely rather than guessing. This is something I think I've even found in some tenants I've worked on. Most times, Windows versions are not being tracked. You just rely on regular Windows updates. But with compliance policies, you can actually automate that and ensure that, and also with the Windows updates settings as well in Intune, you can enforce that devices pick regular updates or feature updates, as the case may be, on their devices as much as you want. So you can set up Windows Update Ring. I think that's also one of the classes we'll be looking at in this deep dive session. So that's how we can remediate this kind of non-compliance in an organization or in your particular setting. So now let's look at the compliance policy versus configuration profile. What are the key differences? So like I said, they are almost the same because it looks like you have the same setting or they're checking out the same rules and everything, but they're quite different. So if you look at week 4, when we spoke about configuration profile, if you look at the purpose, what does configuration profile do? Or what are the features of the configuration profile? So it's actively push settings to the device, configures its behavior. As you know, you create these settings to modify particular things on the device using configuration profile. But what does compliance policy do? It's passively just evaluates whether the device already meets the health requirement. So it's not actively looking out and then blocking access. The only time it blocks access, the only time this guy compliance blocks access is when it has been married with a conditional access policy, which we'll still look at. But compliance policy on its own would not do anything. It just gives you a report and you can see what's going on. So it's just acting passively, like on the background, tells you this is going on with your device. You need to fix this. You need to fix this update. You need to fix, if it's an application update, you need to fix that update, blah, 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 as the case may be. Then when it comes to another dimension of action on device, what it does on device, it writes registry keys. We saw that, I think in our last, one of the demo we did in the last class as well. We saw how we configured the antivirus settings, if I remember clearly now, and some other settings. So it writes registries, it deploys certificates, pushes VPN configurations, and then changes device state. But the compliance policy only reads the device state, checks for PIN, encryption, OS version, and doesn't change it. So like I said, it's so most times as you are, if you're starting out, you can create a configuration profile and then create a compliance policy to fact check what you've created as a configuration profile. If you don't want to go through the steps of checking like the configuration profiles reports, something like that. So you can easily just create a configuration profile and then use the compliance policy to fact check what you've created as a configuration profile. That's the way some admins can create it. Then next, the results is applied or failed. We saw that in our last class. You see it. If it's applied, it's applied. If it's not applicable, it shows you it's not applicable. If it's failed, it expressly states that it's failed. And then it's not running any action on that device. And it's also reported per setting in Intune. While on the compliance side, it tells you compliant or not compliant or device is not online, and then the result is written to the Entra ID device object. Then what is configuration profile used for? We use it to configure Wi-Fi, Bluetooth restriction. I think we blocked Bluetooth, we blocked USB as well in the last class. Certificate deployments, ADMX policies, and the likes. But for compliance, we use it to drive conditional access decisions and triggering non-compliance actions. So like I said, when users or when admins set up compliance policies, it's used most times to be able to identify the next line of action to take when it comes to conditional access settings. So most times you run a compliance policy to show you the loopholes, to show you what's going on. Maybe users are accessing your organizational resources on jailbroken devices or stale devices that are still running a very old OS version. Once you have that report, that can guide you, can also guide the business actually to create conditional access policies and say, okay, I don't want devices on these so OS versions to access my resources. I want them to have the latest version because obviously, with the latest version, you've had some patches fixed, you've done some hot fix and everything. So that can actually solve business needs and also even solve the IT needs of the organization. So that's why conditional access plays a very big role when setting up compliance policies. I always say this, and I'll still say it as well. Don't just set compliance policy. Set it bearing in mind that you are going to marry it with a conditional access policy. It's all good to set just a compliance policy, but bearing in mind that whatever results you get from there is going to be tied to a conditional access policy you have to fix. So that should also be what you should do. I think it's actually the right thing to do. Then how can you layer it? Can be used as standalone. That's for configuration profile. As you see, it does not require conditional access. When we did this in the last class, we didn't have to set up conditional access. And that was one reason why I didn't go to conditional access too as well in the last class. But for compliance policy, it's most when paired with conditional access. Otherwise, it's just a report. And I think I already overflowed that. And then an example of a configuration profile is pushing a certain catalog policy that blocks USB storage on Windows devices. But on the compliance side, sorry, is to check that BitLocker is enabled on Windows devices and mark them compliant. So for example, if you create a configurational profile for BitLocker and you enforce BitLocker setting, you can create a compliance policy to check that is enabled. So once it checks that, you can then go ahead and create a conditional access and say only require devices that are compliant. We'll see it. I think we'll also create it if we have time. We'll create it and say only require compliant devices to access my resources. So that means anybody that wants to go to any organizational resource, maybe as simple as accessing Outlook for your organization, they have to be compliant. And then what makes them compliant is that they have BitLocker enabled. And what makes BitLocker to be enabled is that you've already pushed the configuration profile that enforces BitLocker. So you see how the three can even work together in one scenario. So that's it. So the best practice is use configuration profiles to, I think I should call it config profiles. I've been calling it too long, it's making me breathe through my tongue. So use config profiles to enforce settings, then use compliance policies to verify those settings, take hold or took hold, and get access via conditional access accordingly. This line actually summarizes everything about the config profiles, compliance policies, and the conditional access. So use one to enforce, use compliance to verify, and then conditional access to get. That is, these three actually helps you to build a very good zero trust front. If you have these three configured, your device you can actually say you are already building a zero trust front for your organization. So next, let's move to the next slide quickly. So what are some common compliance rules? That means what can Intune check? Want to get a report. So you can check some common rules are you can require a password or PIN of a minimum length, e.g. 6 characters, enforce complexity, set a maximum inactivity timeout before the screen locks, and limit the number of failed signed in attempts before the device wipes itself. On Windows, this maps to the device lock policy. On iOS, it maps to the passcode payload. These rules ensure that physical access to a lost or stolen device doesn't automatically mean access to corporate data. I remember one time I was working on a project for a particular organization, and we almost set this particular rule or this setting that limits the number of failed signing attempts before the device wipes, and then we're kind of recommending 10 times, but the business said no, that they already identified someone that would definitely forgets passwords or PIN. So that kind of person is not someone we want to wipe the device. So that's why it's heavily customizable. You can set it depending on what your organization requires. It's not just one size fits all. You can set this and then you can create some level of PIN. So most times when you're setting password and PIN requirements, you can enforce it. Like I said, this can be created as a config profile, and then you can create a compliance policy to check it to ensure that it's actually working. Same as the next one, which is the encryption BitLocker. Compliance policies can require that storage encryption is enabled on the device. Windows, this means BitLocker. On Mac OS, it's the file vault, and it's the native device encryption. Intune does not enable BitLocker via a compliance policy. I think this we already know. We've already said it. That is done via a configuration profile, config profile, or endpoint security policy profile. The compliance policy simply checks, is BitLocker reporting as enabled? Yes or no. If it's yes, it says it's compliant. If it's no, it says it's non-compliant. If the device hasn't configured BitLocker, it will fall into a non-compliant state, and conditional access can block it. So you see how all these tools work together. So, and I think it's one of the things I always say to people as well, that you can't just Microsoft's framework is so simple and so large that you can't just create a setting somewhere and let it go. Sometimes you want to integrate it. You want to ensure that it's actually you are blocking loopholes. So perfect example is using config profile plus compliance plus conditional access. You see how you can easily fix issues like BitLocker in the organization. The next is the minimum OS version. Organizations can mandate a minimum operating system version. For example, Windows 10 running the 22H2 or later. This ensures devices running patched or end-of-life OS versions cannot access corporate resources. You can specify a minimum version and optionally a maximum version to prevent access from preview insider build. This rule is the most common cause of non-compliance in large enterprises. I'm sure some of us already know this. It surfaces devices that haven't received Windows updates for months, creating a powerful operational incentive to keep fleets patched. So this is one if you are currently managing it and you don't have this as a compliance policy, I would even advise you get on it on this call with me right now, because this one you should have, except you are not managing your devices. But if you're managing your devices, this is one of the policies you definitely want to have. It helps you to check that your devices, someone is not using like a stale device and then accessing your organizational data. It helps to protect and then guard against that. Then we have the health attestation, which is via the health attestation service, provides a cryptographically verified report of the device's boot states. Check for people that are particular on secure boot, TPM, and the like. It checks that secure boot is enabled. If it's not, it reports it, obviously. And that no boot time malware was detected. Intune can require this attestation as a compliance condition. All this we'll see when we go into the Intune Admin Center to create one of the policies. The next is jailbroken router devices. This is very, very common, especially in cases where you have your organization relies very strongly on BYOD. So most times you find that users will just get any device and then try to access your organizational data and everything. But you can actually check whether a device has been jailbroken, iOS, Android, and then if it tries to bypass with a conditional access, you can actually block it. So you can block jailbroken access or routed devices. This one is even something I've seen some organizations very, very serious about setting up. They don't let this go. They ensure that they have this policy set up for to block jailbroken devices. So if you are going to access my data, you have to be like an activate device and not just one that has been jailbroken. Then lastly, here is the threat level, which is the integration with Microsoft Defender for endpoints. So what threat level does is it just checks for the risk score on your device. So for example, you have scores like low, secured, medium, or high. So it checks. If it notices that your device particularly is maybe low or it's high, and then you know when a device risk score is very high, it might be susceptible to vulnerabilities or active threats. Those kind of device you can now pair with a conditional access policy to say that if you find any device with high risks, block them or grant them access maybe through MFA or something, or require compliance and anything. So that's just part of the integration you get with Microsoft's Defender for endpoints, and how that can be integrated into compliance checks as well as enforcing the conditional access policies on the devices when you know their machine risks score. So now let's look at conditional access. I want to believe many conditional access, and if you're not, this conditional access is just from the name. It's basically granting access based on conditions. So you know, with your identities, you have authentication, we have access levels, we have authorizations and everything. So you can always authenticate, you can also get authorization. But with conditional access, it ensures that you are only accessing whatever resource based on conditions. And what are some of these conditions? And then we can also be called signals. Some of these conditions involve the user and group identity. So it checks who is this person that is signing in. Is this a privileged admin account or a standard user? So for example, if a particular resource is only supposed to be accessed by privileged admin account, if a standard user tries to go to that URL, it checks, and then based on the condition set, it either grants you access or it blocks access from that particular resource. Another condition is device compliance state, which is what we're going to be tying into our compliance policies. So it checks, as Intune marked this device compliant. This is the key Intune integration point. So this is where Intune works perfectly with conditional access. So for every compliance policy, everything you've created and the likes, once you've created that compliance policy, to check compliance or not compliance state. If it flags the device not compliant and you've created a condition as device compliance state that says block, if I try to sign into that resource with that particular device, it automatically blocks it because your device obviously did not pass the Intune mark for compliance level. And as we said, this is one of the key points. Then the device platform. Is this a Windows, iOS, Android, or Mac OS devices? Policies can be platform scope. Yes, so when using conditional access, you can also set it depending on platform. For organizations that do some level of remote working or allow users to access resources from outside of the office, sometimes they'll tell you they only want you to access on a Windows PC and not on your iPads or on your Android tabs and everything. That way, conditional access can also set conditions and say, okay, ensure, I don't even want to say ensure, I would say enforce the setting that my resources are only accessed from a Windows PC. So if I, for example, Adekunle now tries to log into my organization on my phone or on a pad, I would get the authentication right, but the authorization becomes false because I'm not authorized to use an iOS or an Android phone, except I'm doing that from a Windows device. Another condition is the location. So you can set named location. Is the request coming from a trusted corporate IP range or from an unknown country? This is something that is used for organizations that like to work directly from maybe HQ. So you're working directly from HQ, but you're signing in from a branch that you are not supposed to sign in that day. You definitely know that if the decisions or the access control is to block yours to grant access, you'll definitely be getting blocked. So you can create this for organizations where you only want your users to sign in from Lagos. You can set that particular location and say, oh, okay, Lagos or a particular country. By the time they're signing in from another country, they get blocked because they are not within the corporate IP range that you've set up as an admin, or they are from an unknown country, maybe Russia or Uzbekistan, as the case may be. Then sign-in risks, which is identity protection. So another condition you can check is, as Entra ID identity protection flagged as risky based on anomalous behavior. So this speaks to, for example, I think a perfect example would be the atypical travel. So someone that signed in to maybe Exchange. Is someone unmuted? Are you trying to ask a question? Okay. Shew, are you trying to ask a question?
No. Sorry.
All
Let
right.
me introduce
Okay.
myself. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So, like I said, for the sign-in rigs, you want to check as Entra ID flag session, and I was talking about atypical travel. Thank you. So, for atypical travel, you can say, for example, someone that signed into Exchange Online, maybe they checked their mail like 2 minutes ago, and the IP was showing somewhere around the Keja, and then the next minute they're accessing a SharePoint site, and you are seeing an IP that is showing maybe Tokyo, Japan, or Russia, or you're seeing Pakistan. Obviously, that's a signing risk already. So you want to believe that the same person can be in these two locations within a difference of even 20 minutes. If you're going to take a flight from here to Russia, it's obviously going to take a while. You can't just be signing in within minutes in different locations. So except you're obviously using VPN, but if there's already um, a setting that's supposed to either grant access or block access, it determines what to do because you've said, okay, this is a signing risk. It has been identified as a signing risk. So it blocks or it grants access maybe by requiring a multi-factor authentication or something. We'll see that in the next card here. Then app being accessed. Is the user accessing a high-sensitive app, exchange, or a lower risk one? So I've assisted some organizations to set up conditional access for access to Exchange and OneDrive. So they set it up in such a way that it will require your device is compliant. It would also require that you set up MFA. But if you're trying to do any other thing, say you're working on Word on the web, but you're trying to access Word, it allows you to. But when you're working on other applications, it can actually block your access to it. Same thing with admin accounts. So I know I've worked on some conditional access policies where we restricted admins to the number of sessions they can work on, say, for example, Exchange Admin Center or even all the admin centers. So you can restrict to be sure that, okay, this person is supposed to access Exchange Admin Center, and then you create block access or you create a grant access. So these are the conditions you can set when setting up conditional access. We'll still see it in the demo. I'm just using this to explain. And then the next in the conditional access, which is also another important TAO, is the access control. So access control, what does it mean? So this is what happens if you either fail or pass any of the conditions here. So if your device, yes, we're speaking about Intune and then we're particularly looking at device. I don't want to say user. So if your device fails or passes any of these conditions here, what then happens? So these are the access control. So one, we can grant access. So we allow the sign-in with no additional requirements used for low-risk users and compliant devices and all. So if you pass it, say, okay, it's confirmed that you're actually a privileged account that's supposed to access admin center, it allows you, or it confirms that, okay, this person's device is marked compliant and all, it just grants you access. Also, you can grant access and then with MFA. So you can require multi-factor authentication before access is granted. So this is mostly done where you need a privileged admin account to sign into to a particular portal. So if it's that, you don't just grant access. You also want to verify that it's actually the admin, because admins can share passwords. I hope admins on this call. Let me see who's on the call. I hope admins on this call are not sharing password. If you are, Zero Trust Bro is coming for you. But then you shouldn't be sharing your password. And even if you do, most times that's why you should have conditional access to ensure that you grant access with MFA. So with MFA, you don't just grant. Once they put in a password and it goes through, it would also require multi-factor authentication. So that could be either your biometric, if you have Windows Hello for Business, or it could also be YubiKeys or the Authenticator app, second phone number, an email to an alternate email address, and everything. Then also you can require compliant device. So this is the one we would actually want to test today. We want to ensure that the device must be marked compliant in Intune. So if it fails all this, if it fails, for example, the device compliance state, you want to require is compliant. So this actually blocks it. If it's not compliant, you can access something as simple as even Word or even Teams on a mobile on that device, or even on the web on that device. Then also you want to require hybrid AAD joint. So this is being used in organizations that have some level of hybrid architecture, or that balances hybrid infrastructure. So most times you just don't want a regular device to access your data. So you want to require that the device actually is joined to the AD and the Azure AD. So in this case, it means that if that device is only joined to AD, if it's just cloud join, it won't still access. It will get it blocked, except that device is hybrid AD join and must have been configured actually. Then this is the most restrictive one, which is just to block access. So whether you fail here, as long as you failed any of this, you just want to block the access, except you pass. That's when we grant access. So you see, so you just deny the request outrightly. But I'm not even asking you to do, this one is not even asking you to do MFA. It's not asking you to be compliant. It's not asking you to join something or anything. It just blocks the access because you flagged or you failed any of these conditions. And then the last one is to require approved application or app protection. So this is done for when you set up app protection policies. So most times this must have been configured on the Intune side and to ensure that only specific Intune managed apps can be accessed, meaning that if you're trying to access Outlook, that Outlook must be one that you've gotten from company profile, company portal, sorry. It must be one that you've installed from company portal, and then your organization is the one controlling like that. Then the session controls. So this is where enforcement also happens. So outside of just the access control that you get from conditional access, you can also enforce some controls on the session. So first off is sign-in frequency. So you can force your authentication after a defined period. Yeah, I think one of the places where I consulted with, before then, it used to be a free for all. Anybody could have admin access and then just log into admin. You see people go to workstations, get the system and just sign into admin and then just leave it there, forget to sign out and then hope that signs out eventually and everything. But then I think I developed a sign-in frequency. I was very, I don't know if I should say this because this call is being recorded, but then I was trying to get on some people's nerve and then I set the sign-in frequency of an hour. So, and this is why. This is because I'm very strong on zero trust. I sometimes don't see why you should be signing into admin center for so long and you don't do anything. And most of us are quite guilty of it. You just sign in and then you forget and then you do something as you come back and maybe someone has access to your system and they get into the admin center. But we set that thing up for 1 hour and then there was a lot of setbacks, a lot of drawbacks. No, I can't keep signing this one, that one, and everything. But then obviously it was a test. But by standard, I think by Microsoft best practice, you can start with 8 hours. So most times you can do 8 hours. Some people even reduce it. But like I said, it depends on what your organization requires. Because this is a browser session. You shouldn't be just signed in for 8 hours or something. You can do an hour. Some people do 30 minutes and enforces that you sign in again, do the whole process of MFA, whatever MFA, either password or either PIN or either authenticator app. You have to do this every 30 minutes as long as you're signed into the admin. At some point, even you as admin, you will not want to go into the admin center anymore because you know you have to keep signing in. But this is how you control the sessions. Because as you know, this grants access, opens you up to that admin center. But then you need to control what's going on because you don't want to be persistent. So like we said, sign-in frequency, you can force your authentication after a defined period. Persistent browsers as well. You can control whether stay signed in is honored or disabled for web browser sessions. So how many of us know that thing where you sign into any office application or anything and then you say, do you want to stay signed in? Yes or no? That thing, I want to say something, but I won't say it. That thing could actually be false sometimes. You know that no matter how much you say yes, most you might have to sign in again. It's always because this persistent browser session is always turned on and defined for enough minutes or defined for a number of hours. Okay, I can see someone said it never works. Yeah, it won't work because that thing there, even when this is not turned on, it won't work. So I can understand. All right. So next is app enforced restriction. You can use SharePoint extend session policies to limit what users can do in browser. So for example, you can enforce restriction on SharePoint sessions. So maybe someone opens SharePoint on the web. You can enforce the settings such that you can download from an unmanaged device. So if that device is not managed, if it's not enrolled, you can block downloads directly using the conditional access policy. So it's not limiting access to the resource. You can access whatever data from online, but when you try to download it to that device that is not managed, it blocks it, and then it cuts off that session. Also, there's the MCAS and Defender for Cloud App. That's cloud DLP, basically. It's the cloud access sessions. So you can route sessions through Defender for Cloud Apps for Intune DLP and activity monitoring. Then we have token binding. This is in preview. You can bind access tokens to specific devices. So this prevents token theft attacks from being used on other devices. And then there is continuous access evaluation, which is to revoke access tokens immediately when compliant and no waiting for token expiry. So as you know, compliance policies is an evaluation. And with Intune, it's something that keeps checking in device. So your device can't be, most times, I would even say yes, most times, your device may not be totally compliant, because when a new policy kicks in and say your device is still outdated, maybe you fell out of the policy or you fell out of your sync policy, it automatically checks that device as non-compliant. So with this kind of enforcement, if it notices that a device that has been compliant, say for the last 6 months, suddenly becomes non-compliant, it doesn't just overlook it. It will block it from that session and then require that the device becomes compliant before it can resume the activity as well. So that's for the conditional access policies. Then let's look at how you can use compliance and conditional access, the end-to-end flow. So number one, device checks into Intune. Yes, with the MDM, device checks into Intune every 8 hours. Well, I would like to let you know now that I don't think it's even up to 8 hours anymore. I think I've triaged this in different places, and most times within an hour, device would actually check in and then pick without syncing. And I think you can also test this out. You don't have to wait 8 hours to get this regular cycle. I think that has been worked on. And from the last communication I saw on the Intune roadmap, I think it will soon be in public preview. It's not 8 hours actually. It's now very, very less than 8 hours. So once it checks this, it submits a compliance report, the OS version, BitLocker status, pin presence, and any MDE risk score. Intune evaluates each rule in the assigned compliance policy against this value. Then what happens next? Intune writes compliance states to the Entra ID or the Azure ID. So once it writes it, based on that compliance report, Intune then marks the device objects in Entra as either compliant, non-compliant, or not evaluated, right? Then what then happens? Say a user now tries to sign into a protected resource. So the user opens Outlook, Teams, Point. Their client app would redirect them to Azure AD for authentication, right? When you try to sign into any of these apps, you have to do some level of authentication with your password, with your username and password. Now, as part of the sign-in process, Entra ID evaluates all applicable conditional access policies. If you are very familiar with reading sign-in logs, you see that you see evaluations most times. It checks if it's actually assigned to any conditional access, and it lets you know the one is evaluated, the one that it worked on, the one that it approves, and the one that is actually failing. It checks your user identity, device location. It checks all these signals before deciding whether to grant access. So except you are not scoped to any conditional access, that's when you can pass something like this. But if you are scoped to conditional access, all checks are being done. Obviously, to the user, it's in the background because you just see something rolling. But to the admin, you know what's going on because it's checking all these signals one by one. And then conditional access evaluates the policy. So the CA policy condition require device to be marked as is evaluated against the device's current compliance state in Entra ID. If the device is compliant, access is granted, obviously, except you've added additional controls like MFA, but we are not even looking at that. We're just looking at, we want to know that the device is marked as compliant, which must have been done on the second number here. But if it's not compliant, that's in a non-compliant state, the user sees a blocking page explaining the device doesn't requirement with a link to the company portal to see what needs fixing. And this is one thing I see. So I think I'm sure most of us must have seen this as well, real time. where you try to access. But when you're not compliant, it will redirect you and show you what is not compliant so you can fix it, or you can have your admin fix it as well. All right. Then next is non-compliance part. So the user is guided to remediate. Most times the blocking page leads to the Intune company portal app, which shows the user exactly which compliance rules are failing and provides actionable guidance. So for example, if it's the enable BitTalker on your device, or update your PIN to at least 6 characters. So this means that the user might have a PIN that maybe is not up to 6 characters, but because that has been required, it will tell you this, and then it's something you can fix. Or like I said, the admin would have to fix it. And then once this remediates, the device would also resync with Intune. The compliance state would also update in Azure AD to now show that you're compliant. And then the next signing attempt succeeds. So all this happens in the back end once you become compliant. But without being compliant, as we know, the device would always continue to be in a non-compliant state, and they would always continue to get. All right. So next, let's look at Windows Hello. So I think most of us are familiar with Windows Hello. There's also a distinction between the regular Windows Hello and the Windows Hello for Business. And from the name, you already know the Windows Hello for Business is the enterprise-wide. The Windows Hello is the per user setting as you can on your PCs. So what's Windows Hello? How can we marry Windows Hello into compliance as well as so Windows Hello for Business replaces the traditional password with a strong device-bound authentication credential backed by a cryptographic key pair. The private key never leaves the device. It's stored on the TPM chip, and authentication happens locally via a gesture, PIN, fingerprints, that's biometric. A PIN in Windows Hello for Business is fundamentally different from a password. It is device specific, compromising the PIN gains nothing without the physical device. So the difference between the PIN and the password when it comes to Windows Hello for Business is the PIN is set on the device. It never leaves the device. Password goes with your credential, but the PIN is on the device. So that when you set up a PIN, most times on your device for Windows Hello, regular one, or even for the Windows Hello for Business, it's device specific. So even if you get that PIN and then you think you've gotten access, and you don't have my device, and you try to access another device, it obviously won't work because it's only local to my device and not any other device in the organization. And then it's backed by an hardware security. So from an Intune perspective, Windows Hello for Business sits at the intersection of configuration, which is enabling and configuring it, and compliance, requiring it as a condition of access. So how do we enable Windows Hello for Business? So we'll see how this perfectly fits the marriage between configuration profile, compliance, and conditional access. So we enable it using configurational config. Going back to configuration profiles, we enable it via config profiles. So Intune's identity protection templates or settings catalog under Windows Hello for Business lets you enable Windows Hello for Business tenants wide or for specific device groups. So these are some of the things you can configure: minimum PIN length, alphanumeric if required, whether biometric gestures are enabled, and whether TPM is mandatory. You can also set the TPM preferred PIN, and you can block PIN recovery to ensure the TPM is the only root of trust. So all this is what you enforce on the config side. Then on the compliance side, the Intune compliance policy for Windows is require Windows Hello for Business as a compliance as a setting in a compliance policy. So when enables, Intune will now check whether Windows Hello for Business has been provisioned on the device and configured with a compliant gesture. So what this guy checks is to ensure that you've actually set up the PIN, you've set up the other biometric, either your face, your fingerprints, or anyone are enabled with your hardware on that device for Windows Hello for Business. It checks all that. Once it checks it, then it marks it as either compliant if all those has been set up. If it's not set up, it will be marked as non-compliant, obviously. But if it's set up, it marks it as a compliant device. So combine it with conditional access policy that blocks non-compliant device. This creates a powerful enforcement part. Users who haven't set up Windows Hello for Business simply cannot access Exchange Online or other protected resources until they do. And then A common advanced condition uses Windows Hello for Business as an MFA satisfying credential within conditional access. So as part of the conditional access policy, you can enforce that Windows Hello for Business is set up as the MFA condition for a compliant device. So what I'm trying to say is, if you push Windows Hello for Business any config profile, you've also done a compliance rule, then with the conditional access policy, you can enforce and say require devices to be marked compliant before they can access, and then grant access based on MFA. In the MFA, then you now require Windows Hello. So it's just ensuring that Windows Hello works from the config side to the compliance and to the conditional access side. So now we've spoken about compliance and then how to get devices to be compliant. But what happens in cases where devices are not compliant? I always say this jokingly when I'm with my colleagues that I don't think I've found one organization where you don't have a non-compliant device. No, there is always that one stubborn device that no matter whatever you push to it, it would be as very, very stubborn and then would be non-compliant. So most times when you are running, I've seen cases where organizations will want to run audits and then will say, this device that is showing non-compliant. When the likes of KPMG see this now, it looks like you're not working and everything. But then it's actually because most of these settings are checked. As you know, Intune checks in 8 hours, which is now like an hour. And then something can actually make your device non-compliant. It could be at the point of where a setting breaks or something happens on the device and then it breaks a particular feature. Once Intune checks, it immediately marks it as non-compliant. Once it marks it as non-compliant, it means that you already have a non-compliant device waiting for you in your reporting, either in the Azure AD or in the Entra ID. So what can you do for non-compliance devices? Because this is not something admins will want to keep checking every day. That's why it has been automated. That's why it's a setting you can just set and then keep tracking, but you don't want to keep going there every day. So look at the grace period concept. When a device first becomes non-compliant, Intune does not immediately trigger all actions. Instead, each action has a configurable day delay. Starting from the moment non-compliance is first detected, day 0 means the action fires immediately. Day 3 means the action fires 3 days after non-compliance was first detected. This grace period allows users to self-remediate minor issues like expired password without being immediately locked out, while still creating an escalating consequence if they ignore the problem. Intune tracks the non-compliance start date per device per policy, so each device clock runs independently. So what that means is the non-compliance state is tracked per device and per policy. So if a user, as you know, you can sometimes have more than 1 or 2 devices in Intune. One of your devices could be compliant and the other one could be non-compliant. It's not a function of your user account now. It's just a function of the policies, and it can also be the function of the devices, but it's not a function of the user account itself. So that's what the last line means by tracking the compliance per device and per policy. So it checks if this device is compliant. If device A is okay, it passes it. If device B is not, it makes it non-compliant. If device A is failing a policy, it fails it. If device B is passing a policy, it also allows it, and that's just the dynamism that comes with non-compliance. So let's look at what each of these day zeros and day 3 means. And then I want to explain what it means by firing the action immediately. So for day 0, if you mark your device as day 0, or if you set a policy and put it for day 0, you mark, okay, I can see someone's hand raised. Is it a question? Can you wait to the end, or do you want me to answer now?
Okay, maybe
Emmanuel Adebayo.
to the end.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the day 0 means that the action fires immediately. So if, for example, your device is onboarded today and then you immediately push a compliance policy to it. I think on our tenants, the test tenant, we don't have any compliance policy. There's a default one. It's just to check the device sign-in. So that one it's just a default one. But if we go in now, which we'll do in the next few minutes, and then set a compliance policy, we can set the number of days to mark it either compliant or not compliant. So if it's day 0, it's immediately marks it as not compliant. If it's day 1 to 3, it sends an email and everything. So let's look at each of these ones. So day 0 is to mark device non-compliant immediate. So the immediate and automatic consequence of any failed compliance rule, the device state in Azure AD changes to non-compliant. If a conditional access policy requires compliance, access to protected resources is blocked immediately. So no action is required. This is automatic and cannot be disabled. The user sees a notification in the Intune Company Portal app explaining which rule failed. So this explains what day zero meaning that if the user has, say, been compliant before, and then something happens, it falls out of compliance and it becomes non-compliant, immediately that device is, I don't want to say delisted now, it becomes non-compliant, meaning with conditional access policy that has been set up, it blocks access to resources. So they could be working on and just require that they just discover that this session is blocked or they can't do what they were doing like 20 minutes ago or an hour ago because the device is now non-compliant. So that's the function of the day zero. Then day 1 to 3 can allow Intune. So Intune can automatically send a customized email to the non-compliant device primary user. The email explains what is wrong, which policy is violated, and what they need to do to remediate. The message template is fully customizable. See that you can include the organizational logo, help desk, direct links to remediate, and then multiple email notifications can be changed with different delays to create an escalating reminder sequence. So it means that Intune will give you 3 days before it makes your device non-compliant. So within 3 days, you'll get an email telling you what to do and everything. But if you still fail the 3 days, device would now automatically get blocked from accessing resources. Then we also have this day 3 to 7. So as an alternative or supplement to email, Intune can send a push notification to the user devices via the Intune portal app. This is more immediately visible than email and is particularly effective for mobile devices where users may not check email as frequently. The push notification opens the company portal app showing the specific compliance issue. So this one would see on, I've seen this happen on Windows devices most times. You just see a very small pop-up on the right side of the screen, down right, telling you your device is not compliant. This is what you need to do and everything. So you can also set the push notification like that. And then you can now set within the 7 to 30, whether to remotely lock the device or to retire it. So for devices that remain persistently non-compliant, such as a personal device that the user refuses to enroll properly, Intune can initiate a retire action. Retire removes corporate data and manage apps from device without wiping personal data. Sorry. Unenrolls it from Intune management. Alternatively, remote lock is available. This sends a lock command to the device requiring the user to enter their PIN and password to unlock. Both actions are recoverable, unlike a full wipe, but serve as strong escalating consequences for non-remediation. So in the case the user is still being stubborn and not trying to fix the, maybe you've asked them to set a PIN and they're still using 5 digits instead of 6 digits. Within 7 to 30 days, you can actually retire the device or remotely lock device. Like you see, it's not okay. Thank you, Siri. So it's not actually advised to wipe the device. And the reason is in cases of personal device, you don't want to wipe personal content as well. So what you would do is to retire the device. So that one retiring is just to remove corporate data. I would say when I first started out, this is a personal experience. Now, when I first started out with Intune, I used to find it difficult deciding whether to retire or to wipe a device. It took a lot of studying for me to understand what the two of them meant because I would sometimes think it was the same, but then no. So those actions are very different. Retire only removes corporate data. Same thing as when you retire from service. You are only taking out, yeah, let's go from the corporate world. Your personal life is still there to live now. So that is more advisable in this kind of cases. And then you can remotely lock devices within 7 to 30 days. All right, so let's see. I'll walk through. I think we've come to the end of the slide. We want to go into the tenant now. We'll navigate to the platform, device compliant, define compliant rules, configure non-compliance actions, and then assign and create. All right, so I'll stop sharing this screen now and then take us quick to the admin center. So maybe I can take some questions while I get my admin center up. I think it was Emmanuel Adebayo that had a question, or is it in the chat? Let's see if I can locate that.
Hello, can I go?
Yes, you can, sir.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation so far. So I actually had a
Okay.
question in the chat, and I also have another question also.
Okay.
So I would like to ask if you have seen a situation where you have devices that are being displayed as non-compliant, and when you check these devices, you check the compliance policy that was applied to the devices, you could not find any non-compliant status on those policies. But the devices keep showing non-compliance for like some days, but you can't find a policy that is making it non-compliant. Have you seen a situation like that? Because I've seen an
Okay.
environment like that. I keep wondering why are they not compliant.
Okay. So I could have said it's weird, but then it's not, because I think I've seen something like that, where it looks like nothing is being applied to the device, but you see a non-compliant state. And I've found out over time, most times, that your devices should not just exist without a compliance policy. I stand to be corrected though, but that's why it's always nice to have, most times, the default compliance policy at least set to your devices, because that one basically just checks, it just checks, I think we'd see it now, but I can't remember it from the top of my head. I think it just checks whether activity on the device, and then if it sees activity on the device, it just marks it as compliant. But most times, what I've seen is that admins would still take out the default compliance away from the devices. That's what sometimes leads to some level of offhand non-compliant situations on devices, where you now see that nothing is applied to the device, but it's telling you it's not compliant. So most times, what I advise in that case is just ensure that device still has the default one. That's the one you get in a new tenant or in a newly configured tenant. You can even also create it as a regular policy and just assign it to that device, and it fixes that. Because I would not lie to you, that thing looks like it's very weird. But to fix it, and the fix I've seen over time is just apply a very simple policy to it, and then it fixes that non-compliance. So I don't know if that helps, but that's like a practical solution I've used over time.
Okay, all right, thank you. I have my other question is in the chat.
Okay. Okay, the other question is in the chat. I'm trying to get my password and my username, which one I use. Okay.
Okay, let me just ask it. Okay, I just want to know it might be out of scope. I just want to know the major difference between the Windows Hello and the Windows Hello for Business and Intune, because I always thought they're the same configuration. We do Windows Hello for Business, same thing as Windows Hello. So is there a major difference between them? Or what's the difference between them?
All right. Thank you so much for that question, Emmanuel Adebayo. So Windows Hello and Windows Hello for Business, they are not the same, and I would explain why. And I think I also just even explained from my slide. The Windows Hello is native to your PC. So this is the Windows Hello policy is what you set as I'd say a local admin. It's a local admin setting on your PC where you can configure biometric as your second factor authentication on your local PC. But Windows Hello for Business, from the name, is the one that is set enterprise wide. So it's a setting that is pushed to you from an enterprise state. You can't, as a local user, configure Windows Hello for Business. It has to be deployed to you, or it has to be configured for your device or for your user. So that's the difference. And why it's also not so different is because it's the same setting. You are configuring the same biometric, you're configuring the same PIN and password. So that's why it might look like it's the same. But most times, if you configure Windows Hello, you're only configuring it as a local admin. But if you configure Windows Hello for Business, you are configuring it because it's been enforced from the admin side or from your tenant side. So in cases where you have, say for example, you are working in an enterprise, your device is managed, but you don't have Windows Hello for Business configured as a policy or anything, but you've set up Windows Hello. What you've set up basically is just Windows Hello. Though you are using a managed device, though your device is, but because there's been no configuration for Windows Hello for Business coming from the admin center or coming from the organization, if you go ahead and go into setting, maybe you have admin, you're an administrative user on that PC, Or obviously, if you're a standard user, I think you can also set it up. Yeah, I think as a standard user, I should be able to set up Windows Hello too, except it's been blocked. But if you go in and set that up yourself, it would allow you to set it up. But just know that whatever you set up is just basic Windows Hello, except the prompt or the enforcement is now coming from Intune or from the compliance and the configuration policy, or the one from the conditional access. That's when you now have Windows Hello for Business setup. So I don't know if that explains the two of them. It could be the same, but let me just simplify it and say the settings are the same. What you configure in Windows Hello is the same thing you configure in Windows Hello for Business, but the setup, who determines the setup, is different. So the setup for Windows Hello is done by local admin. The setup for Windows Hello for Business is configured by the global admin or the Intune admins in the tenant. So I think that should answer your question.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, if there are no other questions, you will see that I actually was on this screen for a moment. Okay, I'm not sharing yet. Okay, can you see my screen? I've been trying to find my password. Okay. All right, so this is what I was talking about. This thing is a fluke. It never works. I don't believe it. I just think a particular team was paid to ensure that comes up in the authentication process. I hope that team is working on AI now. All right. Let's go to Intune. Okay, so going to Intune. I want to see. I think I also need to start up our devices on the Hyper-V. Okay, so please let me know which screen you can see now. Can you see the admin center screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's see. So
Yes,
this
we
is all right. Thank you so much. So this is the Intune admin center. We currently have 2 devices, and yes, you see, not in compliance, 2 devices. So let's go and see. Let's even see if this checks what Emmanuel just said. So we have Windows. Okay, good. So we have 2 devices not in compliant. We have one in that is compliant. So let's see. This one that is not compliant, what is it missing? So we click on this. And then we go to the device compliance. And then we see, so this is the default device compliance, right, guys? So for this account, the last contact is 5th, 2026. Okay, let's see. So why is it not compliant? As the compliance policy assigned, which is this default one, yes, is active. Enrolled user exists, yes. Is the enrolled user existing? Yes, this is the enrolled user. Adekunle, I think this one or this one of the two. Okay, it's this one, right? Let's go back. I want to be sure because okay, yeah. So it's this one, and that's the one I just signed in with this account. Enrolled user exists, so that confirms. But if you guys remember, we are working with VMs, right? And I can't remember I think the last time I turned on the VM was the last time we had the class. So, and I told you Intune reporting it continues to evaluate almost every hour, 1 to 8 hours. So it means that it's been a while I signed into the device. That's why this is not active. We'll sign into it now. We'll sign into one of the devices now and we'll see if it corrects itself before the end of the call. So that's why this is not compliant, right? Let's another one. So that's why I said most times if your device is not compliant, it shows you per setting what is failing. So in the case of what Emmanuel said, like I said, there would always be exceptions. There are some weird exceptions you won't understand. I would want to assume that the default compliance is not assigned. And please, Emmanuel, you can also check. And maybe before the next class, we can even use that to confirm as well. But you might find that this particular default compliance maybe has been taken out. And if it's taken out most times, because it's not there. So this one says it has the compliance policy assigned, but it's still not active. So now let's go and see the one that is active. This Yakubu manages system and see the device compliance. But this says error. So why is it active? So it has a compliance policy assigned, says error, is active compliant, enrolled user exists, but it says error. But I hope you guys know that we could see that these policies are assigned to it, right? But it still says error. Let's refresh and see. So this is something we can debug. This also I've seen in places. I don't know if anyone too has seen something like this where the policies are signed, but to still tell you it's erroring out. Well, we are going to start up both VMs now and see what's going on. So before we do that, let me see if I can turn on this one's. Can't even remember which one is for each user. Would syncing resolve that? Yeah, so most times when we sync, it's checking. Why? Okay. Most times when we sync, it checks that the device is online as well, and it runs the syncing should be able to resolve that. But let's see. So let's even try to sync those devices as you said. Let's sync this one. I don't know what's running in my background, but my VMs are not starting. You can see the last check-in time for this device. It's been a while. Let's see the other one. This one too. Yeah. It's the one we used in the last class. That's why it's still active. But let's sync it as well. Yeah, so what's going on with my VMs? Why can't you allocate space? Okay, I think I have a lot of things running. Okay, let me just kill some processes. Let me see. It's been a moment. I restarted this because I've closed most of the processes. What else could be going on here? Which one is eating it up now? Oh, okay. See what's going on. Can only be using 20%. Yeah, guys, just give me a minute. I'm still trying to kill some processes on this PC. I have a lot of things open. Duh, 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 duh. We are just going to reduce the space required. See if that works for now. Okay, so it might be slow, so you guys will just permit me. Let's go back to Intune. Okay, this is the Windows 11 dev. Let's see the other one, the Autopilot one. Station starts. Looking for the one we enrolled last. Okay, I just want to get them started before we start looking at the policy setup. So once they start up, I'll minimize this. Take the other one is starting as well. Okay. Okay. Okay, so this would also run. All right, so while this is running, I'll just move the standard screen. Okay, so now let's look at our compliance settings. So from the O, compliance policies can be set up per device, as we saw during the slide. So you can set up compliance for iOS, you can also set up for macOS, iPadOS, and Android as well. But for the sake of this session, we want to look at compliance for Windows. So I'm just going to set up a compliance policy for Windows. Okay, I see there's a question. Let me go to my team screen. Okay, which question is that? Please increase the front. Okay, Emmanuel Adiba, he has a compliance, what now? It has a compliance policy assigned and it's showing any error. Just that it's not compliant. It's not showing any error. Okay, I think I'm interested. Like we know, some of these things can act funny, but I think we can look at that. Okay, let me just proceed and we look at the compliance policies. So, so is it clear enough now? I think I've increased the font. So this is compliance policy. And as you see, it's quite empty because we don't have anyone created yet. The evaluations you could see from the previous ones are what's it called now? The default policies. So what you would find if you could drill into any of these devices is just the default policies. You won't find any other one in there. And we saw that from the one that we actually saw as well. So this is default. Though it's in an error state, this is just default. But we want to now create a policy this time. So first off, let's do create policy. So we select our platform. We can select Windows 8.1 and later or Windows 10. Then the profile type. So if you remember with the configuring profiles, we also had this type of types. We had settings catalog, templates, and what's the last one now? I think the endpoint security type as well. Then also for compliance, we also have templates and then Windows 10 compliance policy. So let's look at each one. So for templates, we can search. This is showing no data. Let me see. Why is the template not showing? Hold on. I'll just do a quick refresh. We should have some templates here. Okay. I still don't know why it's not showing. Can anyone check on their end if templates show up on the compliance side to be sure it's not just me? Could be a downtime, but you should have templates for these policies. But let's just say Windows 10 and 11 compliance. Something I think we need to check. So let's call this deep dive compliance policy. Should it be one word or deep dive? Okay. Description. This is set up to check, to evaluate policies on Windows 10, 11 devices. Okay, so click on next. So these are compliance settings you can set up for Windows 10 and 11 devices. So we are going to look at each one of them. So let's see, you want to do custom compliance based on a script that you may have configured. So if we require this, it means that you must have configured a JSON file with some customizations basically. So for those of us that would build custom compliance settings, it can be configured into a JSON file and then imported or uploaded into Intune. So for the pin setup, you want to do the BitLocker requirements, the Wi-Fi requirements, or anything you want to set up. Instead of doing that manually, you can do that with a JSON file, the script. So that's what this particular setting means. But we are not doing that. We are just configuring locally. So if you remember, I spoke about the Microsoft Attestation service. This is a compliance process that checks for the health. And the health of the device actually is looking at protective measures at boot time. And these are the measures you can do. So for the BitLocker we spoke about, you can require that it checks BitLocker. You can require the system also has code boots, secure boots, basically tied to the TPM. Then you can also check for code integrity. So it's not just running any code or running any processes. You can check. Like we know, this is an evaluation. It's not enforcing it. So even if the device doesn't have BitLocker, it will tell you. And if it has, it also tells you, just report it back. also for the code integrity. So it's not like it's going to block you from running any process or any child process or any code. It's not going to block you, but it's going to let you know that this device is actually allowing the users to run any kind of code, and it's not just checking the integrity of that code. So let's just click on require. Then next we can look at is device properties. So for device properties, this is the one I said must be configured. So we have minimum OS version and maximum OS version. So let me see, can we, okay, I want to get inputs from us on the chat. Let me know Okpemi, this is the Windows 10 compliance you have in the chat. Thank you. But I was looking at the templates. Can you see if you can access the templates? Can you help me check that from your end? Thanks. So let's give sample minimum OS versions in the chats. Let me see if you are following or maximum OS version. Bearing in mind that we're going to push this to one of our devices, and our device is a VM. So let's see, what can we set as the minimum OS version? What can we set? I want to get from the chat. Also, we can set for mobile devices, but let's just focus on this minimum OS version. So please give me responses on the chat, the minimum OS version and the maximum OS version we can set. While you're at that, let's look at the next things we can also set. So configuration manager compliance. We want to require that the device is compliant from the configuration manager. So this comes into play if, for example, your organization also has hybrid configuration with device management. And hybrid configuration device management, I'm talking about your devices are co-managed. There's a co-management setup. Co-management in the sense that your devices are either managed or, should I say either and, either they are managed on SCCM, which is the System Center Configuration Manager, which is now the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, or it is managed on Intune. And devices managed in both places. So for example, co-managed devices on both ends, either on the co-manager and the endpoint manager, which is Intune. So this setting requires that. So if you click on this, if you click on require, and your device is only enrolled into Intune and not on SCCM, it will flag your device as not compliant. Okay, thanks, Mokpayemi. Because I know there should be template there, but I'll check why that is not showing. So if we set this to require, sorry guys, it means that this device must also have some level of presence in configuration manager. So like is only applicable for co-managed devices running Windows 10 and Intune. All Intune only devices will return not available. So we are not setting this because we know we're only working with Intune device management devices. So yeah, so I've still not gotten opinions for the minimum OS version. So I'll just set something there and make sure our device is not compliant. All right, so next is the system security. So this is where we can evaluate that the device is actually using the right password or the right PIN. So for example, you can set simple password and say, okay, you want this to fly 111, 1234 and a case, or we can either block it. Then we can set the password type to either numeric, alphanumeric, or the device default. Let's do alphanumeric. Now I want to set the password complexity. Say, I want to require digits and lowercase letters, or digits, lowercase and uppercase, special character. Let's just do, okay, let's do everything. Require digits lower, and then the minimum password length. So let's do 6, right? My activity before password is required. Most times you can set this to 5. So what this means, and I think I should explain this. I've seen cases where admins will set this up to maybe 1 minute and then complain that users are still using devices after a minute and everything. And then I have to let you know, like, this is just an evaluation. for the fact that your users are still using the device after 1 minute, it would mark your device as non-compliant, but it's not enforcing it on device. Why, before you set this up most times, you must have configured a config profile to fix this. And most times just set it again as the compliance policy to evaluate it. So I could set 5 minutes here, and then maybe on my config profile, I have 10, set 10 minutes. I could have 15 minutes. With 5 minutes elapses, it's not going to sign out or sign out the user. What it just does is it logs it in as the device is not compliant, obviously, because it has even seen it as one of the profile settings. But at 15 minutes, because the config profile has been set up, it's going to lock out and require a new sign-in activity for that user. So that's the difference. Because like I said, I said when I started off, I would always confuse the two. Sometimes I will only set up compliance policy and then be beating myself up that it's not working on the device until I go back to set up the config profile. So that explains that. Also, password expiration days, you can set a minimum. We know that with cloud accounts, Microsoft advises that password shouldn't expire, but for the device, you can actually set a password expiration date and require that users change it. Most people do 3 months. So that can also be set. Number of previous passwords to 5 to prevent reuse. So this can be set. Require password when device returns from idle state. You can require. The next is the encryption. So you want to require encryption of data on devices. So when you do this, it requires that device is encrypted. If your device is not encrypted with BitLocker, it will flag it as non-compliant. Device security, you want to require firewall, TPM, antivirus. Let's just turn this to on. Defender, you want to require Defender anti-malware. We don't have a Defender license yet. So I think even if we require this, it's going to throw us off compliance. Well, basically, with even these two, it might throw us off compliance because of our device is a virtual machine. But let's just even turn it on and see. So require this as well. The next, we want to look at Microsoft Defender points. Require the device to be at or under the machine risk score. We don't have Defender for endpoints. Let's just set this as low. We are seeing more reasons why this is going to be non-compliant, right? So that's why we're setting it up. And then this is for Linux systems. Okay, so let's go next. So actions for non-compliant. So this speaks to what we. So first off, if you want to mark device as non-compliant, 0 days. So if you do this, it means that device would become non-compliant, right? We can also set up send email to end user. So let's do message template. I think there should be some custom ones here. Okay, this should have been created in the tenant administration, but none. So we can set this. And then, like we know, we can set number of days to this. So we can set 3 days, or we can say 7 days. Add device to retire list. And then we set 30 days. All right, so these are the non-compliance actions we can set as we saw from our chat. This one, I'm supposed to have a message template here. So let's do this. I would have to create a new tab. Let's just even set one. We'll refresh that page and go back to it. I have limited time. Devices. Windows. Compliance. Let's see. Okay, let's go from all devices first. Let's go to compliance. Yeah, so in the notification settings, so this shows you all compliance policies regardless of the platform. So this one will list all the platform, but I'm just creating directly from Windows. So this is the notification. Let's create a notification that we can use for that policy we are creating here. So let's do make this device compliant ASAP. Put my words, please. Let me use capital letter. All right. Email letter, show company logo. Do we have a company logo? I think we do. Footer, information. Yeah. Notification message template. Add a template. Let's use English, United States. Okay. Let's do this again. Okay. This message is sent to you to ensure that or else you will. Okay, I don't advise this. You should have a standard template, but we're just testing out. You will be locked out. What else? Shikena. Okay, so save this. I thought we don't have any default one here now. Okay, let me set this to default then. Okay, next, review and create, Okay, so let's go back to what we're doing. Okay, think a quick refresh. I hope it doesn't take us out. I thought about this. Okay, let's see. We should see it now. Good. All right, so we're adding this notification. Select. All right, so go next. And then our assignment. So we know inclusion, add groups, all user or anything. So maybe I should just add all devices. Let's just add all devices. Just a few of them. And then we create. Okay, so as you know, just with configuration profile, you can track the policy, see who has picked it up, who is compliant, who is not compliant, and everything. So these are the properties we created, if you guys remember. So let's see what's going on with our devices. I think we synced them. Let's see if any of them is now online, because I need to sign in. Okay, so this is Yakubu manage. The thing is, I don't think I remember Yakubu's password now, but I can reset it. Okay, I think it worked. Did it? Okay, so this one is actually Adekunle's I don't know why I signed him out. Let's just try to sign back. Okay, let's see who wins. All right. Okay, I had to reduce the space, so it's going to take a while to load. Let's just give it a minute. Okay, put in this guy here. Okay, so we are going to now sync again to see. Let me go back to sharing the admin. So let's see what's going on with the devices. So last check-in time. Okay, so this one has checked in now. Sync it again. Let's see device compliance. Okay, so it has not picked it up yet. Okay. Let's see the other devices as well. Okay, this one has not synced yet. Okay. All right. Let's see what's going on here. Let's go to settings. Yeah, it's going to be very slow. Very, very slow. Well, let's just go to our compliance and see what's going on. So devices, compliance. Yes, so at least one compliance policy is assigned, but you are not using Entra Conditional Access for compliance. So you see why I said you have to actually use conditional access, because setting this up is just there to report. And Microsoft is also now letting you know that you actually have to have conditional access to get the right value, whatever you get as an export from here. Okay. So I want us to just see if this has actually been assigned to any of these devices and see what's going on. That's why. So I think I want to take questions as we go on, because we have very, very few minutes left. Can this policy be combined with devices from on-premises if device writes back is configured? Okay, so if devices that are on-prem are Entra ID joined, which is Azure ID joined, yes, you can actually combine it. If devices that are on-prem but also have SCCM, so in the cases where you also have SCCM, then you would have to determine where the workload should come from. Because, you know, on the, what's it called now? On the co-management console, you determine where you want devices to pick policies from and configuration from. So for compliance, for configuration, for endpoint settings, if you've toggled it to the endpoint manager, which is Intune, yes, it would work for those devices. But if it's not toggled to that, it means that it will be picking from the SSM if you're able to create from there. So yes, the policy can be combined with devices from on-premises, but they have to be AD joined. They have to be hybrid joined. Thank you, Okbayemi. So our policy is still not syncing yet. Maybe we should give it some time. Yadi, hey Yadi. All right, it's good to have you here. Does it mean without proper compliance settings, user can gain access to your data? Kindly clear. Okay, so how best can I answer this question now? Without proper compliance settings, user can gain access to your data. No. No and yes. And this is why. Compliance settings are there to evaluate. So if I say without compliance settings, user can gain access to your data, yes, they can. Because you can just have compliance set up if there's no enforcement with it, which is why we looked at today's classes, conditional access, compliance policy plus conditional access. So we are not only just telling you to work on compliance, conditional access bits to it. So it means that you need to have compliance policies set up to evaluate it, and then have conditional access to grant access to either grant or block the access to it. So in a case where you don't have config profile, so I think I should even just go back to sharing the PowerPoint slide where I said config profile is to enforce. Maybe I can even drop it in the chat. So we just have that as, if that's the key takeaway we can take from this class today, I would be very glad. Config profile is to enforce. Compliance policy is to evaluate. And conditional access is to determine what's the right word now? Let me see if I can get the right word. So I just don't say what I have in my head. There was a particular word. Yeah. It's to get the access. Yes, perfect. So conditional access is to get the access. All right. So if you have this in mind, it would answer your question, Yadi. So if you only set up compliance setting without a config profile set up to enforce it, or a conditional access to get the access, whether to grant or block, it's more like you're just setting something to report. Because what you get outrightly from a compliance policy is this, a reporting. Let's say that, okay, you asked this guy to turn on BitLocker, but he didn't turn it on. So his device is non-compliant. So it will still be able to work, like I said, without that you've configured a config profile or you've configured a conditional access policy. So let me quickly just, while we wait for this, let's quickly even just look at the conditional access policy. So maybe we can use that to drive on some points. But I think, okay, Yadi, if I think that should make sense with what I've dropped in the chat. So let's look at conditional access policy from the Entra ID admin center identity. We have just a few minutes. Let me see if I can rush through this. Oh, when I need to fly. Okay. So this is the Entra ID. Yes, you're very familiar. All right. Thanks, Yadi. Why are my pages now slow? What's going on? Is it because we are close to the end of the class or session? It was fast at some point. Okay. I just want to walk us through one of the conditional access policies, so we see what we spoke about. Okay, here we are. So on the Entra ID, you've got ID protection, ID governance. I think we're familiar, but for those of us that have not, go verified ID, global secure access. This is like your VPN solution. On the Entra side, global secure access. Verified ID, we've got governance that manages privileged identity management. I don't know how many of us are quite familiar with privileged identity management. If you're not, I think it's something you might want to look into. So this provides just-in-time access for your admins where you can set time, something similar to what we did with session control on conditional access, but this is more defined and more granular. But I don't want to digress, so let's go back. We have the ID protection, where you track risky users, risky workload. For the example of the atypical travel I mentioned, there are risk-based conditional access controls as well. But we are going to conditional access, which is just a setting under the Entra ID. So this is conditional access. Okay, so this is the overview of conditional access. You can also track sign-in logs and audit logs directly from here. Right here. I want to show us the policies. Then if you remember, I spoke about named locations. So named locations, you can set up named locations here. I don't know why this thing is taking time to load. It's just the VMs I have running. What could be wrong? Okay, my system might actually need a restart though. Okay, so these are the name locations. So you can set up countries, locations, and just name them as your own location. For example, if I was an admin for my own tenants, I could just set my location from Afghanistan. If I set this and only allow traffic from here, it means that just as I'm trying to sign in now, I would obviously get blocked, except I'm using like a VPN solution or something. So you can set your locations here. This is perfect for organizations that have branches or anything and want any users to sign in from. You can also set IP ranges. So if you're trying to go more granular, you can actually set IP ranges you want users to connect from and upload. Then let's go to our policies, which is what I want to show us. We'll try to create one policy. So this is a new policy. So these are examples of this example of conditional access, a condition of when any user is outside the company network, they are required to sign in with MFA. When users in the managers group sign in, they are required to be on an Intune compliance. So these are the kind of things, condition controls, if you remember the slide, what you can work with. So let's create one, custom made. I don't like the way this thing is loading slowly. All right, let's call this deep dive. Deep dive CA. All right, so user and agent, let's see who we want to add here. Okay. So these are what we can set. If you remember from the slide, we spoke about the conditions. These are user and agent. So you can specify if you want to include everyone, or you can exclude accounts as the case may be, select users. Okay, now I want to select users because I don't want to just put everyone there. You know, I'm currently signing in with the admin. Okay, let me even see the devices and the user sign into them. One more admin that I can use. Okay, these devices are still not. Last checking. Okay, these two. Why this one will not show, guys, is because I remember the device was first an autopilot, and then I think we removed it and enrolled it as a regular device. So this is a stale. I think this one is quite stale. I may have to take it out. But I'll show us how we can take out devices as well. We can use device cleanup rules to take out devices from Intune. So let's just go. I'll just push this to Yakubu manage. It's going to be a escape RAM. Okay, so and then I've included Yakubu manage. So it means that whatever I configure here is only applicable to Yakubu. It's not applicable to the other users in the tenant. Also, we have exclusion. So in case maybe you want to include everybody or everybody in a group, but exclude one or two persons, you can also exclude either by guest rules or directory rules. For example, I can say I want to exclude a device manager or anybody that is a global admin. I want to exclude them from this policy, so I can exclude. So that can be determined as well, but I'm not excluding. They included this guy. So what are the target resources? What do I want to block? So now I want to block Yakubu from accessing resource. Let me choose one resource. Let me say Exchange Online, right? That's email and everything. So let's look for Exchange. Can we find Exchange online? Okay, no. Or let's just block him directly from Office 365. Okay, so this means we are blocking this guy from Office 365 on the conditions that we'll still set now. So I've selected Office 365, and that's next. We're not excluding everything. We're only blocking him from Office 365. So you can also set up network. This is in preview, it's new. So if you have trusted location or anything, you can configure this as a setting, but we've not set up a named location, so I'll just let this fly. Then yeah, this is the condition. So I spoke about user rigs, or signing rigs, device platform. First off, let's look at device platform. So the condition is whenever Yakubu Manage is trying to enter Office 365 we know he doesn't have an Android. He might have an iOS, but it's not his own. It's for Adekunle. So we want to block him from Windows, right? So we are saying Yakubu Manage trying to access Office 365 on Windows. Click on done. You can also set locations here. You can client apps as well. But if I configure this, it's blocking him from browser, the desktop app, complete. Either it's trying to do it from a browser or from the application itself. It blocks him everywhere. So we can configure this. I'll say done. We can filter for devices. If he has, maybe want to filter, you say, okay, out of all his devices that are enrolled, there's one that I think, okay, whether it's compliant or not, maybe the one that that's corporate, fully corporate owned, or maybe a kiosk device or something. You can actually filter that out. Or we don't have a filter set up yet, so let that go. Then the user rigs. So if is user rigs from what's the guy now? From the identity protection, if it's currently high or medium, you can configure this as well. But I won't configure this yet because I don't even think there's Defender checking that on our tenant. So we can leave this. But first, what we want is device platform on Windows and then applications. So now let's go to the grant. So this right here is where we now decide whether we want to block access or we want to grant access. So if I block access outrightly, I don't care who this guy knows, even if he knows the current sitting president, as long as I've blocked access, it won't be able to access anything, Exchange or any Office 365 app on desktop or on web. It's blocked from it totally. But if I grant access, I also have to set a condition. I can require multi-factor authentication, meaning that I want him to use MFA before he can now access the Exchange online. Or I can require device to be marked as compliant. It's not even a function of all. It can also be and, as you can see, I can select the two. So this is the one we are looking at actually because of our compliance policy we've created. So that is one setting we actually need. Okay, so this one now has failed because, okay, let's see what's going on here. Okay, so it has picked up the deep dive compliance policy, but let me quickly finish this before we go back. So why we actually working on conditional access is because of this one setting, require device to be marked compliant before we allow him to access Exchange online. So that's it. So other ones you can set is require multi-factor. Okay, I won't turn this on because this is what we're looking for, but I'll just explain. Require multi-factor is requiring other forms like phone call, app, and everything. Requiring authentication strength is based on the authentication strength policies applied. So authentication strength means that if I've set authentication methods like MFA, phone call, alternate email, and everything, I can set top priorities and say, okay, depending on the strength, I want him to always use app. It's later on, maybe you can use, but for this particular one, I want him to use app and not the text or the call. So you can determine the authenticity that then are required to be compliant, which we know. Required to be Microsoft Entra hybrid joint, which I spoke about. So if I select this, it means that if Yakubu is currently signing into this VM, which we know that is not joined to any local domain, it will be blocked from accessing Exchange Online, which we've configured here. So that's turned off. Require approved client app. This one is if we are doing the application itself. So we've created, for example, yeah. So these are the Office applications, and app include this. So it requires that it's actually an approved application for Microsoft, but it's not even, because we already require this to be compliant. Then require protection policy, require password change, require risk remediation. So this one, if he currently has any risks attached to his user or to his device, he has to remediate it before he can access it. So if I check this, if he likes, if he doesn't remediate it, he won't be able to access as well. So we've only selected which one now? Not selecting strengths. We just want to select to be marked as compliant, and we've selected that. Then the session, which is the last one. So use app enforce restriction, use conditional access app control, if that is configured. Sign in frequency, like we said. So you can set up period of authentication either in minutes, you can set it up, or you can even do it every time. Persistent browsing, you can also set this up. Disable resilience, defaults, and customize continuous access evaluation. All these are what you can also set up. You can also enforce the use of GSA, Global Secure Access. That's the VPN from Microsoft as well. But I would leave this. So now this is the critical point. By global practice, Microsoft standard, when you set up a conditional access, it should actually be set up as a report only first. So you review the logs and then determine if you want to turn it on. Because I see most will just create a policy and turn it on. If you lock yourself out, you have to go through the data protection team to get your tenant back. So most times, except you have a break glass account, which you must have excluded here. So most times when you create policy, you always have to exclude your break glass account. Every tenant should have a break glass account. But if you've not excluded and then you just turn this on and then it's something that affects everybody, bro, everyone is locked out. So let's just go with it and then say we want to set it as reports only. And this is because we know that our policy, our compliance is going to fail, which I think it already failed. So that's how you create a conditional access policy. So there are many more you can always create. Let me refresh this. It should be here as a policy. Just created it now. And then let's go back here. So you see, it's been created by user, reports only, it shows the data and everything. So this is our deep dive. So in a standard tenant, you find some Microsoft managed policy. It's just because it's a demo tenant. But in a standard tenant, you will definitely find some default policies that you can play around with to start out with a fresh tenant. So now let's go back to Intune. So this is our device, and it has picked up the compliance. So I don't want to look at it directly from device first. Rafia, please, I think I'll just spend just 5 minutes and then I'll be done. So I just want to look at it from the compliance itself first before we go into devices to see the reporting. So this is compliance. So in the compliance, it shows you the policy, right? This is our policy, deep dive compliance policy. And the deep dive compliance policy, we can see compliance 0, non-compliance 0, others 2. So now let's view the reports. Okay, so it's showing this as error and conflict. Why manage is conflict? This one is error. So let's see. So we'll go into desktop now. I don't know why. I think there was a time we could click directly from here. As soon as we can, let's just go back to devices now. Okay, so right from here we have I think, is this the device that picked up the policy? So let's see the device compliance and let's see what failed. Okay, so this is conflict. You can see the other one now is compliant, but this is why I manage. because it's now active. But because of the custom compliance policy we did now, that's why it's showing as if it's failed. So let's see. Okay, so it checked for firewall, is compliant. Files compliant, BitLocker not compliant. And that's obviously because there's no BitLocker policy. Code integrity compliance, okay, that's nice. Defender is there, simple password complexity. Said it failed because let me see, my password doesn't have digits. So this will fail, obviously. And remediation is even failed. So minimum password length compliance is more than 6 years. Maximum minutes of inactivity is not even set. So I don't even know what is compliant, but it said it is. So require password type and then root time protection. So this one that shows conflicts, I'm trying to see. I don't think we have any other policy that it conflicts with on that device, except we've created something that is different on the configuration. So if you have a different configuration profile from your compliance policy, maybe there is a conflict, but I think we can check that. But basically, we can see everything that failed here. And I wanted us to see how Yakubu also sees that from his end. But if you remember, I'm not sure he will see it because he won't get the email until the next day or the notification until the next day. Or let's even try to sign into web for this account. Yakubu manage. Okay, I don't think I want to open it there. Let me just open an in private browser here. Let's see if we got an email for the compliance, right? You know, we set it to 3 days, but let's see if it actually honors that countdown. So do outlook.office365.com. I hope I remember the password for Yakubu manage. I manage. At. Okay, seems I remember it. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that explains why to fill the password complexity. But I won't tell you guys my password. Okay, we should be in. No. I don't think I've ever had to come into the email. So let's see if it's anything that speaks to compliance here. Okay, so nothing yet. Nothing. But what I'll do is I'll keep checking and looking out. If I find an email, I'll probably drop it on the WhatsApp group so we see that that particular setting we created is actually in action. Also, won't get a notification yet. So I'm just trying to look at notification bar. Okay, this just says encryption is needed. And why is this saying encryption? If you remember, our configuration profile for requires encryption. So, but I've not done this. I think I know why. So that's it basically for the compliance policy. Other ones, these ones I want to check. This conflict also I'll check. So maybe before next class, I would explain why all this. But I want to track the email and the notification that comes on this as we go on. So I think that should be it for our session for today. If there are no questions, first off, I want to apologize for taking your time. I think we've gone 17 minutes past 6 o'clock. So thank you guys for today. Thank you. Over to you, Rafia.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adekunle, for that wonderful session. Thank you for taking your time to take the labs and the detailed explanation. For those that would still like to have a review of this, you can check out our YouTube channel. The recording would be uploaded soon. So you can just subscribe to that channel, and you can get that notification once the recording is available, right? So hopefully in the next 2 weeks, you'll be having another session with Adekunle, and you can always feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you all for joining in today. We look forward to seeing you. For those joining the mentorship program, we'll be having our mentorship program this evening by 8 p.m. Please do well to join the class. We also have an upcoming agent camp event that would be shared in the community too. Would also encourage that you register for the event and attend the event. Thank you all so much for joining. We look forward to seeing you in our subsequent sessions. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Thank you so much, Adekunle.
Yeah, thank you, Zerafia, and thank you, everyone.
Okay,
Bye
then.
for now.
Bye, everyone.